All right, and welcome to the very first episode of the Talktagon. Just so happens that this one's going to be on my channel this go around. We've got it set up, so you're going to be able to watch this one after the fact. We've got a lot of different topics to talk about today. As always, joined by Kristen King, MMA from Fansided. You can find her work there, as well as Ty O'Keefe. You're featured on what? Fight Network, Fight Night Picks. You've been a pretty busy guy here lately.
Yeah, and we have our MMA in the afternoons on Dialogue, and we're doing some all 5 round stuff. And I try to help out when I can with Fight Night Picks when you give me the privilege to do so. So yeah, everywhere.
Lots of stuff going on this week. Lots of different fight announcements today. I was really surprised by some of them, actually. I mean, one of them we've seen since about August, and I'll kind of leave a little bit of a mystery. Maybe you guys can fill in the blanks. But Kristen, I'll start with you. Were there any fight announcements today that really surprised you?
Yeah, with Alex Volkanovski and Chad Mendes. That one kind of came out of left field because I think this is return, but they just didn't have a opponent yet. So that one is a nice one because Alex been on a great run so far. So it should be a good test for Chad Mendes to come back and try and claim his stake in featherweight again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one's a great one. I'm looking at it. I saw Aaron Bronstetter. I think Mike Bond might have been the first one to tweet it, and then Aaron was like a minute later, so it was pretty quick. I think that's going to be a great fight. I mean, you had Mendes off on the USADA suspension, comes back, gets the win, looked great at UFC Boise, and Volkanovski coming off the win, same card, but beating, it was Darren Elkins, who was on a 6-fight win streak and looked almost unstoppable. I think that's a great fight. And as far as UFC 232, full card, maybe not the full card, but a lot of the card was more or less put together and finalized, thrown out there today. Kristen, again, were there any surprises on that card for you?
For you, let me take a look at it just to see.
I'll answer my own question while you bring it up. I was kind of surprised. You know, we knew the Fire Kid, Tom Duquesnoy, he'd be coming back. He's got the fight against Nathaniel Wood. That one's going to be a really good one. One of the ones that, Ty, you and I have talked about, and I'll give it to you for just a second, is the fight between BJ Penn and Ryan Hall. Still excited for that one?
No, I wasn't excited for it ever. I don't think BJ Penn should be fighting anymore. This fight is only attractive, in my opinion, because they're both grappling geniuses. So it's a type of fight that if you're BJ Penn and you're one of BJ Penn's guys and in that camp and you're Dana White and you're looking at it, you can say, okay, BJ Penn's not going to take the type of damage that he's taken in his more recent fights, the type of damage that have made us all say, hey, it's time for BJ Penn to hang up his gloves for good. That's not going to happen with Ryan Hall. We all know this. It's just not going to happen. So for that reason, I think it's a viable fight. I'm not interested in it because I think BJ Penn's time has passed. But in terms of the UFC 232 card, I'm very impressed how deep it is. I'm surprised at how low down the card Zingano Anderson is. And that really surprises me. And I'm surprised how high Condit Chiesa is. As well as the Mendes fight. I don't know. There's some placements on there that kind of make me question. But as always, that's what we do. But yeah, I thought Zingano Anderson should be one of the top 4 or 5 fights on the card, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with you. I mean, what do you think about that one, Kristen?
Yeah, no, I actually like that fight. Now that I've seen the card and I know what's on it, I think that Zingano and Anderson should definitely be at the top because this is more than likely a title eliminator fight for that division. So it's a little bit weird that it's a little bit low, but excited for that fight because everyone was high on Megan Anderson when she came in. She had a great fight with Holly Holm, and a lot of people were actually be the first woman for Chris Cyborg, but obviously that didn't happen. So now if she can get a win over Kat Zingano, she gets to prove that she deserved that spot against Chris Cyborg in the first place. Zingano wins. This is her first venture into women's featherweight. So if she's able to put on an outstanding performance, then you have another contender at women's featherweight, which is very, very thin right now.
Oh, thin.
That fight's huge for the division. Sorry to interrupt you, Craig, but that fight's huge for the division. Get Zingano up there at 145. They need this so badly.
Thin's an understatement, Kristen. I mean, geez, there's hardly anything in the rankings, if anything, if we even have your champion, Chris Cyborg. I mean, you've got Cyborg. She's taking on Nunez. That's kind of slated to be the co-main. I think that would sell a lot of pay-per-views on its own. I mean, it's a super fight in its own right, but at the same time, you got John Jones coming back, taking on Gustafsson. That makes sense to have it kind of end of the year, main event for a pay-per-view. I'm looking down this card. Andre Arlovsky, Walt Harris. That's kind of a tough one. I think it's really tough for Arlovsky. He's kind of at that shaky point in his career. He looked good. He looked like he was kind of learning on the fly. His hands were starting to get a lot better. Maybe he wasn't finishing guys, but he was able to win some decisions. And then another one of the fights that I was kind of surprised with, and not Ryan Hall, but Uriah Hall, one of the greatest counterpunchers out there. And he's going to be taking on the extraordinary gentleman, Bevan Lewis, a guy who's 6-0 coming in the UFC after a win on Contender Series, and that should be a good fight too.
Yeah, I'm always interested to see Uriah Hall just because I like strikers. They're my favorite fighters to watch. And as you said, I mean, he's a phenomenal counter striker. I can't help but feel, though, he's one of those guys who hasn't ever really fulfilled the potential that we've seen from him. He's lost 3 out of his last 4 fights, including that knockout loss to Paulo Costa at UFC 226 in July. And his last win was September 2016 when he knocked out was Krzysztof Jotko.
Yeah,
how you pronounce his name. Yeah, and did he win Fight of the Night for that, or Performance of the Night, or something? I don't remember.
I can't remember, but I know
he did do well that fight, and that's the last time we saw it, and that was over a year ago. So this is big for him, but man, he's never met that potential that we've seen for him.
Yeah, there was a video on YouTube, and for the life of me, I just can't remember what the channel is, but they'll do top 10s. One of them was MMA fighters that haven't quite reached their potential, and I was watching it and I was getting upset with fighter after fighter, and then they showed Uriah Hall, and I said, what? He's ranked. I always like watching him fight, but you're right, never really lived up to that potential. And he'll win one that you don't think he'll win. He'll be competitive in a fight you won't think he'll be competitive in. I mean, in Paulo Costa, he got the knockdown, but they didn't count it as a knockdown, which was surprising to me. But yeah, he's 13-9 overall. You wouldn't think it, and he's going to be taking on a tough test in Bevan's UFC debut. And it's worth noting he had 2 wins. He won on Contender Series Season 1, got a knockout, didn't get a contract, went back to LFA, got a win, and then he comes back, gets another one on Contender Series, and finally gets a contract.
Yeah, it should be good. And if, man, you imagine Uriah Hall loses this, you got to think maybe it's chopping block time.
Yeah, I would think so. Kristen, what do you think?
It's definitely one of those things where you really had a problem with consistency in his career but he's taken on like some of the top guys in the division. He's taken on Robert Whittaker, Gegard Mousasi, Derek Brunson. So it's not like he's taken on like top 30 guys. He's on top 10 guys, but consistency, and he definitely does have an issue with reaching his full potential. So if he doesn't get it done against Bevan, I could kind of see them giving him maybe one more fight, because he was next Anderson Silva, I believe, on his season of The Ultimate Fighter after that knockout of Adam Sella. You can see flashes of that Uriah Hall in his fighting now, obviously with the Paulo Costa fight, but it's just something's not there. Something is not clicking. He's not able to pull the trigger as much as he. So I see the UFC giving him one more shot.
Yeah, and I could totally understand that. So we've got UFC 232 pretty much set in stone, more or less, coming up later on this year. UFC 233 was just recently announced. They're going to go head-to-head with Bellator. January 26th is the date for that one. And we've had some fights announced for it, today and in the last couple of days. One of the ones I was surprised with is one of the oldest guys still doing it. Most people don't think about him, Francisco Trinaldo. He's going to be taking on Islam Makhachev. Kristen, that's a tough matchup. I mean, how do you see that one going this far out?
I don't even know just yet, because Islam is doing phenomenal in his UFC career. He lost, and the guy is just so good at what he does. But then you got someone like Trinaldo, who he's around that age, but look at his last fight against, was that Evan Dunham?
Yeah, Evan Dunham.
Yeah. The Evan Dunham fight. I mean, the guy he's one of those guys where it's very that he's in that position that he is in now, because most fighters at his age, they wouldn't be at the level that not Maldonado, Trinaldo is performing at right now. And he has great striking. His jiu-jitsu is great. So I honestly, I don't want to pick someone right now. I really have to look into it, because that's a very, very tough matchup, but I'm excited to see it.
Now, Ty, how many 40-year-olds can you name off the top of your head that are having as much success as he is in the UFC's lightweight division?
None. And I mean, it seems to me that the heavier weight classes are the settings where the older guys are ageless, and the lighter weight classes is younger man's game for some reason. I don't know why, but it just seems like that. I think, a big takeaway from this is something you and I have talked about a few times, is the fact that this is going head to head with Bellator's heavyweight Grand Prix for no reason at all. I mean, this is just, to me, I think it's like Dana White sticking it to Scott Coker for the sake of sticking it to Scott Coker. I mean, really, to me, it's just pointless. And it costs MMA fans. MMA fans and media, we're the ones who suffer, because then you got to make a pick. You don't get to watch both things unless you have two TVs or whatever you're going to do. You know what I mean, though? So it's really the fans who suffer, and it makes no sense to me.
Well, we're on Fight Night Picks channel tonight, but yeah, it's kind of tough when you're a smaller organization. You want to cover both. What do? I mean, I can split my screens as much as I want, but at the same time, it's pretty hard to focus on two different fights at the same time. And I'm really looking forward to the finale of that heavyweight Grand Prix. I mean, most people might see it as a one-sided affair for Ryan Bader, but at the same time, I want to see maybe Fedor can become a champ, later stages of his career. But you've got that Makhachev fight. I mean, 16-1, 4-fight win streak. I was in attendance when he knocked out Gleison Tebow, and I thought, geez, that's it for Tebow. But no, he's going to be fighting on that Tito Chuck card against Askren-Lawler. So I'm sure there's a lot of fans that are really excited for that.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, that one should be an interesting card. It's a very weird card considering the main event, but it makes sense that Gleison Tebow's next fight is on that against, who was it again? Askren-Lawler, you said?
Askren-Lawler, yep.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not excited for that card, but I'm not gonna lie. Obviously, I'm gonna watch it for the sake of fighting. But it's one of those where I might watch it like this with my hand in front of my face, because I really don't want to see it. But I'll watch it.
I think the fact that we now know when Ben Askren is going to fight, that's big. It took the UFC long enough to even get him announced. So, and Robbie Lawler's a good test, as we were mentioning earlier today, and that's whatever. But we got to see the rest of this card.
I'll cut you off. So that fight's more or less set in stone. Just have to wait till the ink dries on the contracts, more or less. But one other fight that was announced for 233, one that I'm really looking forward to. Number 11 ranked James Vick taking on number 15 ranked Paul Felder. That should be a barn burner. The UFC tweeted it out and said fight of the night. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, UFC. That's an early prediction right there. I wouldn't even go that far. And the name's on the hat is Fight Night Picks. But I think it'd be a great fight. On paper, it's a good matchup. But it's so tough to tell. I mean, James Vick, he's been knocked out twice. Pretty rough knockouts. The Dariush one was tough. The Gaethje one was tough. I mean, Ty, what do you think in this fight? Paul Felder's a scrapper, and we saw him weigh in at, 196 on the weekend?
Yeah, and he's coming off that busted hand and that loss to Mike Perry, right? So we're not going to know what we're going to get out of Paul Felder until he steps in the octagon. He's going to give it his all, right? But we don't know how that hand is healed. Is it going to affect his camp? And we don't know how much the broken hand played a part. Is that the only reason he lost to Mike Perry? Or, you know what I mean? So I don't know. But Vic, his star looked like Vic was headed towards top of the division, or at least of an eventual interim title shot or something at one point. And now Vic's kind of, you don't really know what you're going to get out of Vic either, right, after those knockout losses. But I think as of right now, I would definitely give the edge to Felder, just because, I don't know, I think he's a more calculated, more knowledgeable, more adaptable fighter. And I like him heading into it.
I mean, James Vick always has the size. Paul Felder obviously coming off the injury. And Kristen, before I go to you, I don't know if you can hear that. I had the same injury as Paul Felder, and my stick handling, I mean, I got the scars, but my stick handling still isn't where it used to be 2 or 3 years ago. So Paul Felder, that's a tough injury to come back from. And, you know, James Vick, it's tough to come back from a knockout loss in a main event where he talks so much trash against Gaethje.
But I honestly don't blame the UFC for saying that this is possibly fight of the night, because that's exactly when I saw the fight announcement, because you got two scrappers like Paul Felder and James Vick coming into this fight, and it should be but I am a little concerned of how Paul Felder is going to look, but he's shown to be resilient. He can come back from a loss and stuff. Most concerned with is maybe James Vick, is because he finally got that, you know, one of those top 10 guys, and during that fight you could just tell that he really, you could just look at him, his performance wasn't really a James Vick known him to have. So someone against, like, if he's going against someone like Paul Felder, he will at any moment, because Paul Felder will capitalize on that quickly. And that I actually picked Paul Felder in this fight. I'll give you a pick on that one. I'm picking Felder. I just don't know if he's going to come back from such a devastating loss when everything was going so, and he got the main event, and it just, no, it didn't happen for him. So I'm picking Paul Felder. I'm not taking the injury too much into my decision, because I think Paul Felder, he's a veteran, exactly how to get this kind of stuff done, and I expect him to come back stronger, and especially now that he's going back down to 155, where he was almost in the same spot as James Vick, where they were two guys that were just outside of the top 10 and couldn't get there just yet. So I think it's going to be a great matchup, and for me, this is fight of the night until something comes along.
So no other fight announcements that I could really find for UFC 233 coming out today. One other fight announcement that came out, and I'm going to ask you first, Kristen, then I'll hand it over to you, Ty. We've got a pair of women's flyweights. Both of them have 4 losses on their records. You know, a little salty, a little sporadic as to when they fought. We've got Paige Van Zandt taking on Rachel Ostovich at the brand new ESPN Plus fight night for Brooklyn from the Barclays Center, January 19th. Kristen, what do you think of this fight?
I think it's a good matchup. I think that I believe both women are coming off of loss to this fight, so it should be good. Another thing that I'm worried about, obviously, is Paige Van Zandt coming back, because I believe it's been over a year now since fought, and she had those injuries and those surgeries and stuff like that. So this is definitely a tough match, but I believe her and Rachel Ostovich, they have similar fighting styles, in meaning not afraid to throw strikes as long as they are able to get into the clinch and work from there, because we've seen Paige Van Zandt on sporadic. She does move a lot into different positions, but she's wailing on you the entire time. Like, she'll just throw strikes in there as to what she's going to do. She could pull off a submission. She could just TKO you. You never know. The same thing with, so she does the exact same thing. She's more of a brawler type, like those Hawaii. They're just those strikers. And but she's also not afraid to go to the ground, and she does have some great groundwork that was exhibited in her season of The Ultimate Fighter as well. So I think it's a good matchup. Both women need to win this fight. It's very, very pertinent that they win, because I believe Rachel will win. I could see them cutting her, like her second straight loss, I believe. And again, it doesn't. I don't know if they would, just because the flyweight division is also needs to be worked on at this time. So it's good that Paige Van Zandt is her trust. I believe she is 0-1 in the fight against Jessica Rose Clark. Was that flyweight, correct?
Yeah, and lost that one, then had the Waterson loss as well. Yeah, exactly.
So she definitely has a lot to prove. She's beyond the chopping block in any time, because she's one of those stars that the UFC has definitely put time and effort behind, and a lot of people know her. She's a big name. So those fights that either win and desperately here.
And I mean, Ty, so we had Paige Van Zandt focusing on her. She was here, UFC Moncton. Didn't really know why she was here. I still don't really know why she was here. She was here with Austin Vandeford. He just won like the weekend before. They flew out here. I was driving into Moncton by a grocery store and a fitness spot, and they were walking on the side of the road. I thought, what are they doing here? This doesn't make any sense. And then at the weigh-ins, they were there, but they weren't really supporting anybody specifically. I don't know if they're. Yeah, go ahead.
The UFC has always flown in other fighters to fights all the time, whether they have anything to do with the card or not. They fly them in, they pay their expenses, they put them in the front row, they get them to walk around in the community. They do it all the time.
I know. I know what you mean, and I mean, like, I'll think back to UFC 220. I went into it as a fan, and I went into it as a super fan. I wanted to go to every single fan thing that they had. I made sure, you know, when they have those Metro PCS booths, stood with Demetrius Johnson, Forrest Griffin, had a chance to meet Khabib. I tried to do everything. I think the one thing I missed was Chris Weidman, and that was on the drive from New Brunswick to Boston, so I missed out on that one. But for Moncton, the only fan event that there was at Boston Pizza. Kristen, if you're in the States, you're really missing out on Boston Pizza. Heck of a spot to go. But that's kind of what they went with here. They had Chrissy Blair, Vanessa Hansen, and they had Elias Theodorou. And that was the only fan event that I could find. So Paige Van Zandt and Austin Vanderford, I'm sure that the UFC paid to have them there. I obviously didn't watch a whole lot of the broadcast because I had the chance to watch the first fight and the last fight. And then other than that, it was pretty much, talking to fighters and media. So maybe they showed them on TV and I missed it. But Paige Van Zandt was nonetheless in Moncton. Didn't really see her doing a whole lot of fan interaction, Q&A. Coming off of 2 losses, Ostovich off 1. Ty, how significant do you think this fight is in the women's flyweight division?
For the division, only significant in that the UFC still wants Paige Van Zandt to be a star.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, but for Ostovich, I think it could be trouble if she doesn't win. I don't think Van Zandt is going to go in having to, like Kristen said, she's not going to be on the chopping block, period. The question about Paige Van Zandt, as far as I'm concerned, is the changes she's had in her personal life, the injuries, the surgeries. She's obviously, I don't know if she's married. She's married, right, to Austin Vanderford now. Mm-hmm. And so, there's different. Yep. She's been away for a while. And at a young age, she's very young. And at a young age, when you go through changes like that, your perspective changes. Your the way you train might change. The way, there's a lot of things that change in your day-to-day life. And so it's going to be really interesting to see if those things affect the way that she's fighting and help her, hurt her, whatever. So it's really going to be all about Paige Van Zandt on that fight. Without question.
Yeah, and I think so too. I mean, Ostovich, we look at her record 4-4 as a pro, but 1-1 on the season of The Ultimate Fighter, season 26, which was very recent in a lot of fans' minds as well. She was 6-0 as an amateur, which stands out there. And obviously, Ultimate Fighter, then coming into the UFC, I know she had bigger fights in Invicta as well. So really recognizable women. I know a lot of people were tweeting about it and sending it around on social media saying, say what you will about the two of them. But I think it is a big matchup for sure in the flyweight division. And yeah, I think also if Ostovich is to lose, could that be the end of her UFC career? She could end up back in Invicta. She could possibly end up in Bellator too, because they do have a women's flyweight division there as well. Now, the other topic that we had on the docket that I just wanted to kind of quickly go over, I know, we're going to have the micro event on Dialogue at the end of the week for UFC's 25th anniversary, as well as the Denver card. But the Denver card, it's on Saturday. There's a lot of great fights. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but I feel like it's kind of a top-heavy card, but a lot of stars, again, could emerge from this. Kristen, what are some of the fights and some of the fighters that are on this card that you're interested in?
So for this one, I'm definitely interested. I've long been a fan of his, and it's just one of those things where I'm excited to see what he's able to do again, because I think a lot of people forgot before he had the military service in, was it South Korea, I believe?
Yeah.
So, so it should be interesting for him to come back, and Yair Rodriguez as well as returning. The whole issue with the U.S. since the Frankie Edgar fight, if I'm not mistaken, and this that it's going to be like Yair Rodriguez was also in the same position as Paige Van. They clearly want him to be a star, but once he got tested, I don't want to say that he faltered, but he didn't necessarily pass that test because he finally got that top 10 and fight went. So I'm excited to see how he looks back in the octagon, ordeal to have to deal with the Frankie Edgar loss, the NJFC signing and stuff like that. So those are definitely two of the fighters that I'm and obviously Donald Cerrone too, but he's a veteran in the sport. You know, what he also lost his last fight as well. So, and I'm looking forward to them being answered.
Yeah, I think the main and the co-main are great. Ty, what can you add to that? I mean, it's a card where, you know, you've got Amanda Bobby Cooper taking on Ashley Yoder in the featured FS1 prelim in the States. Even on the Fight Pass prelims, I mean, they are fairly good. I had mentioned the De La Rosa fight and Joby Sanchez. I'm looking forward to that. Eric Shelton's also on the card. You know, one of those exciting flyweights that, are we going to keep the division? Aren't we going to keep the division? I mean, what are some of those fights that you're looking forward to?
For me, it's about two fights. Obviously, Cerrone and Perry, which, in my opinion, since they lost Frankie Edgar, that should be the main event. And Pennington Durandamy, that's the other fight I'm really looking forward to. I want to see where Durandamy's at, and I want to see if she's going to be relevant moving forward whatsoever. She ran from Cyborg, and Pennington's no joke. So I'm really interested to see that fight.
I mean, Durandamy kind of taking a total 180 from Paul Felder and even Tony Ferguson to an extent. They wanted to get back into the cage as soon as possible and face the top talent. I mean, Ferguson's so close to the belt. Jermaine Durandamy wins the belt, and then she doesn't want to face the top talent to defend the belt, and then she's out for an extended period of time, like, you know, kind of her entire MMA career suggested. I know her kickboxing career, she's a lot more active, undefeated there, win over Julia Budd, but then you look at her MMA career, lost to Julia Budd. Somebody bring Julia Budd back to the UFC, please, please. I'm pleading to you, UFC, bring her back somehow, get her from Bellator. I want that a lot. But yeah, this card's great. I mean, I'm looking forward to that strawweight fight between Macy Barber coming into the UFC and Hannah Cyphers. I think that's a great one. Obviously, Joseph Benavidez getting beat by Sergio Pettis in his last fight. I thought that one was really close. Taking on Ray Borg, that's a really tough test. Ray Borg's had a really rough year for sure, from UFC 223 to what's been going on with his son. His son definitely seems to be improving, which is great. So hopefully Borg gets a full camp, a good camp, and he's able to get a great, you know, give a great performance against Joseph Benavidez. And then from there, it is a great card. There's some fighters like Luis Pena. I mean, like I said, Barber, and some others in there that could possibly become even bigger stars after this weekend. So I'm going to start from my left to my right. Kristen, where can people find you online? Where can they find your work?
You guys can find me online at Fansided KK, Twitter at Kristen King MMA.
So we can find your work, Fansided MMA, Kristen King MMA on Twitter. Ty, where can we find you and what do you have going on this week?
You can always find me on Twitter at @AboveTheFoldTy, on Facebook under Ty O'Keefe, YouTube under Ty O'Keefe. We're going to have this special on Friday about the 25-year history of the UFC. We're going to talk to a lot of good writers, things like that. And this week I'll have some content out on the Fight Network, hopefully some written content rather, out on your site. And always tune into MMA in the afternoons on Dialogue, where we do our daily thing on just doing our audio kind of talk radio show.
MMA in the afternoons. And yeah, I sent out the schedule earlier on, so you can find all the different dates and times there on Twitter at Craig Allen FNP. You can also find it on Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. You can find articles, fightnightpicks.net. Can't you tell? This is what happens when the show is featured on the Fight Night Picks website. You can also find more content here on the YouTube channel. I'm going to have another episode of Fight Night Picks this week. I've got a fighter. I've got a journalist. We're going to have a great time on that. There's always some different stuff where it's not actually live like the shows here. So yeah, look forward to that, as well as our mini series on Friday. We're going to have different journalists. We're going to talk about the UFC's 25th anniversary and the UFC Denver card. So thanks so much, both of you, for joining me. And we'll have another episode of the Talktagon out very soon. Thanks.